Hey everybody, I am Heidi Lynn with Austin Entertainment Management, and I am here with my friend Joe Welsh, who is the Will Fairy. And I bring her on for a very special reason because within Austin Entertainment Management, we've got a network of experts that are here to help musicians in all aspects of your life so that you've got a nice, strong foundation. That way you can really go and create some really awesome stuff because you're not stressed out about what's going on in your own personal life. So when I met Joe, man, I knew she understands. She's a musician, she's married to a musician, and she's got something really awesome to share with you guys. So Joe, welcome. Thank you for being here with me today. How are
Oh
you?
my gosh, thank you so much. This is you and I, we hit the ground running. We met at a networking group, and for some reason, our vibes, like we were just like, I want to talk to you, like, oh, I want to talk to you. And that started our friendship. And then to find out that Heidi's a musician. And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. As well as being an entrepreneur. And I put all the listing here of some, actually, it's not all the things I do, but some of them so people can get a sense. I'm a new author in a book called Boss Latina. So I run businesses. I am a speaker. I am the Will Fairy, which we're going to get into in just a moment. And I'm also a vocalist. I'm a singer, a musician, and my husband, for those of you in the blues world, is Monster Mike Welch. He is a blues guitar player and vocalist, just put out a record, is putting out a record right now, and has been around for a while. I'll happily tell you that story. And I'm also an artist and photographer. So I think in that way, we're all very similar, that there's something inside of us that wants to come out, right? Whether it's music or photography or whatever it is, and we find ourselves without a boss, right? Without structure, maybe not in a, maybe you have a day job and you're trying to do your music in the pieces in between. And when you don't have that kind of structure, it can get messy, right? So I'm going to ask just one hard question, and then we're going to talk about it through the lens of being a musician, especially post pandemic, being out here in the world. So I'm going to ask Heidi, do you have a will?
First of all, I barely know what a will is. Second of all, I don't have any things. Like I'm like your classic like musician at this point. Like there's nothing like I mean, I guess I've got some birds and I've got my little cute dog that you often
Yeah.
see
All right.
on my
Right.
videos. But I
You're,
don't have anything and you could just throw me in a ditch and I die.
I know we're going to can you imagine that Heidi wants to be thrown in a ditch when the time comes? You know, I to one, I totally feel you, right? I was under the same misconception that you have to have a kabillion dollars and you have to have all of this stuff and things, and then you're like worthy enough to go into the big wood, wood lawyer, the lawyer's office that has all that dark wood around it with big leather couches, and then that's when you know what I mean? That's where the will is read. I feel, while I love Batman and the the family, we have this major misconception of what a will is, right? We expect that we're going to be given, that there's money to be had and property, and while that is true, especially as entrepreneurs, what we also have is our own value. And a will, actually, before I go too far, I want to say I am not an attorney. Okay. I am not an attorney. I am not dispensing legal advice. Even if you're like, oh, that kind of sounds legally. No, I'm not. I really, really believe that we need to have experts in place. But that also brings me to, not only do I have no money, I don't own a home, but I certainly can't afford an attorney. Like there's so many ways we convince ourselves that we don't have value. And as a first generation Latina, as a woman, like that is my song. It felt like that pretty much my whole life, that what I had just wasn't worth it. And I also know that in musician world, we're so, you're so happy to get the gig and get, musicians who want to play regularly. And there's always the hunt for the next gig. Like there's so much in your day to day that I know and I want to acknowledge you're not getting paid for. I know it. When you're like feeling lucky to get $50, depending on your obviously your level of musicianship, maybe you are at a higher level and you are getting paid, but are you necessarily getting paid commensurate to what's going on in your band, to the expense it took to get there, right? Where's the business training to get us onto the right path? I feel like there's nothing out there. So I created the Will Fairy to start these conversations, to be able to say to Heidi, hey, Heidi, I would like it, since you're my friend, to not throw you in a ditch, God forbid something were to happen. I really,
Oh,
that's not how I see it. It's not how I see the world. I'd like to see that perhaps we take a minute and think about all the ways that you are important and that you have value in this life. And that's what I do. So just I'm going to do the little shameless plug. So the Will Fairy Challenge is a free challenge. So before we move on to that, I'd love it whenever you're watching this, even on a replay, if you would just type yes or no. Do you have a will? Do you have a will? And then second, I would love it if you would just go ahead and sign up for the Will Fairy Challenge. I will say that the dates that are there right now are for next week. However, feel free to check those dates at any time because I'm always putting on the free 2-day Will Fairy Challenge. And I do them at different times of the day. So if one doesn't seem to be the right bag for you, don't you worry. The Facebook group and all the community we're building, we're always going to bring it always back to you guys, and you're going to be able to find out more. So back to Heidi. I don't want to throw you in a ditch. That is bananas. Like, can you even imagine? Can you imagine? Like,
well, I just imagine that everything you're talking about is out of my price range right now, and it does not contribute directly to my survival at this time. So what do
perfect.
you have to say about that?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? That's one of the biggest fears, right? That was the reason I held back from getting my will until my child was 6 years old, because I was afraid of the cost. Like, what would it cost to do that? Now, admittedly, the cost to get a will can be anything, right? Depends on that attorney, how much they're charging. I will say that I do have connections to something that's way more reasonable. And you're not going to be hard sold on anything at the Will Fairy Challenge. It's all about just understanding better about the will. But there are options out there that are way more affordable. And I will say one of my favorite services not only gives you the will, but it also has opportunities for you to get business services, legal services to help you with your business. So when someone doesn't like pay your fee or canceled on you, or, when there's all that sticky legal stuff that you don't know what to do with as a musician, you don't just have to eat it, you can actually fight. But that's my personal, I love it. This is a service I use. I love it so much. But let's just focus on the will for right now. I get it. It feels very scary to take that leap into the unknown. But what I'm hoping what we're doing here is that it's not unknown. Even if you just reach out and chat with me, it's no longer unknown. Do you have a family? Are you making your records? Are you making art out there? Do you own equipment, a van? Are you the person in your band or in your life that's also the one who's, you're making money, you're earning a living? There are people who are counting on you. And so for me, it's not just about the will, it's about the big picture around this life, and this is gonna be a little serious, but like, this life is not promised to us from day to day. So God forbid something happens. How do we protect not only ourselves, but also the people we love?
And I've seen that happen. I've only thankfully lost one best friend to a car accident, and it was very sudden. Like, it was not expected that that was going to happen, as most car accidents are. And um, she did have a will in place. However, it had been a while since she updated her will.
I
So
know.
that became a problem with her family and trying to get all of her orders, her affairs in order after it was all over. And it was a lot of stress on the family.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at its core, the will tells people what to do about your stuff, your property, children. I also will say, like, when you have pets, what's the game plan? What's going to happen next? I will also note that the will does not necessarily determine people and their businesses. What I'm bringing to the table in the Will Fairy Challenge, as well as any of my programs, is that I'm looking at the big picture. So the will is a document that will determine how your property is distributed, but there are a lot of other ways, right? There are trusts, there's a million ways that it can be handled. And I think the thing that people don't realize is that by state, it is a different game. Like, if you're in one state, if you live in another, if you were previously married, if you have children, if you have stepchildren, like, all of those pieces are complicated. And so you need to have an expert on board. So I'm very pro expert in terms of that, because they can save us the time we don't have. Right? Like, I don't know. And if I make a mistake, the only person who's going to suffer is my family.
And that is exactly why I like to partner with experts like you to come on, because I know you've done all the research around this. You know the steps that need to be taken. So I'm not going to waste a bunch of time when I do this. And in fact, sounds to me like you're going to give me some resources that not only are going to help me with like this situation with my will and taking care of my final orders, but also in the meantime help me figure out how to make other legal things more cost efficient for me, and while I'm still living. Hey,
right? Absolutely. And, so the framework that I'm looking at is that everything that we're doing is really more a success inventory. So I know that it doesn't look like that, especially if you're hustling, if you're just trying to fit in music, you're trying to find your passion, you haven't either hit it or you don't know how to make it, or maybe you are, but you're working all the time and you're putting the miles on the car. Like, when we're living life from moment to moment, sometimes there's not enough space to figure out what to do next or how to make it better. And so one of the things about working with me and being a part of my community is that I like making things better. Not only do I speak Spanish and English and American Sign Language, but I also speak musician, I speak baby boomer, I speak Gen X, I speak millennial, because the reality is that we need to have these conversations, and we certainly are not having these conversations. But I know in our next segment, we're probably going to talk about a few people who died without a will, and they may or may not be the people you think. So take it away.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. So thank you for joining us for this little segment. If you're catching this on April 13th, by this weekend, sign up for the Will Fairy Challenge. It starts next week. Again, it's free, and you're going to kind of get an idea of what you need to do to start figuring this stuff out and getting the ball into motion. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It could just be little steps. And I know that Joe is going to walk you through it all in this program. So it's why I wanted you to know all about it. So, Joe, thanks for joining me with this.
Thank you
And
so much.
you're welcome. We'll see you all in our next segment. I'm